I keep hearing people say my husband won't kiss me, just uses me because I slept with another man and told him like it's some kind of tragedy. But honestly, maybe some marriages are just meant to burn down. Maybe some mistakes are too big to come back from. And maybe that's exactly what everyone deserves. The whole thing started about a year and a half ago, when I was still pretending Julian and I were this perfect couple everyone thought we were. God, the way people used to go on and on about him. My friends, my family, even random people at parties would be like, "Oh, Audra, you're so lucky. He's such a catch. He's so handsome and successful and devoted." Like, yeah, I know what my own husband looks like. Thanks. But I just smile and nod because what else are you supposed to do when everyone's telling you how perfect your life is? And Julian really was everything they said. Good job. Never cheated. Treated me well. Great with our 2 kids. We'd been together 7 years total. Married most of that time because we did the whole whirlwind romance thing, where we got married within a year of meeting. Everyone said we were soulmates, and honestly, I believed it too. He was stable and reliable, and all those things you're supposed to want in a husband. But here's what nobody talks about. Sometimes stable and reliable starts feeling like boring and predictable. Sometimes, you look at your life and think, is this really it? Is this all there is? Not that I was planning anything or looking for trouble. But when you've been with someone that long, when your whole routine becomes this endless cycle of work and kids and grocery shopping and Netflix, something inside you starts feeling restless. So, when my friend Tessa was having her birthday party last year and wanted everyone to go out to this new bar downtown, I was actually excited, like genuinely excited in a way I hadn't been about anything in months. Julian said he'd stay home with the kids, which was typical. He never really liked going out anyway. Always preferred staying in. Part of me was relieved because it meant I could just relax and have fun without worrying about whether he was having a good time or wanted to leave early. The bar was packed and loud and exactly the kind of place I never went anymore. Tessa had invited like 15 people and everyone was buying rounds and taking shots. And it felt so good to just be Audra, not mommy or Julian's wife or any of those other roles I'd gotten so used to playing. I was wearing this dress I bought months ago but never had anywhere to wear it. And I felt pretty and young and like myself again. That's when I noticed this guy, Ronan, who kept looking at me from across the bar. He was cute. Not Julian handsome, but cute in a different way. Kind of rough around the edges with these intense eyes, and a smile that seemed like he was thinking something he probably shouldn't say out loud. And he was flirting with me. Actually flirting, like making eye contact and sending drinks over and eventually working his way into our group. I should probably mention I was getting pretty drunk by this point. Like really drunk, more drunk than I'd been since college probably. But here's the thing. I wasn't so drunk I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't some helpless victim who got taken advantage of. I was drunk enough to stop caring about all the reasons I shouldn't do what I was thinking about doing. But I was still making choices. I was still deciding. Ronan was funny and charming, and he was paying attention to me in this way that felt electric. When he talked to me, he looked right at me like I was the only person in the room. When he laughed at something I said, it felt genuine, not like the polite chuckles Julian gave me when I tried to be funny. And when he put his hand on my arm while he was talking, I felt this jolt of excitement I hadn't felt in years. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to go home, to remember I had a husband and kids and a whole life that didn't include this stranger. But the louder part, the part that had been feeling trapped and invisible and bored out of my mind, was saying, when was the last time you felt this alive? When was the last time someone looked at you like this? When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it was responsible or expected or safe? So, when Ronan leaned in close and said he lived just a few blocks away, when he asked if I wanted to get out of there, I said yes. I actually said yes. I told Tessa I was getting a ride home with someone else, grabbed my purse, and walked out of that bar with a man who wasn't my husband. His apartment was small and messy and smelled like cologne and takeout food. We were kissing before he even got the door closed, and it was desperate and hungry in a way I'd forgotten sex could be. With Julian, everything had become so routine, so predictable. We knew exactly what the other person liked, exactly how it would go, exactly how long it would take. This was chaos and passion, and completely different. I'm not going to lie and say it wasn't amazing, because it was. For those couple of hours, I felt like a completely different person. I felt wanted and desired and alive in a way I hadn't in years. Ronan looked at me like I was this incredible, irresistible woman instead of someone who packed lunches and did laundry and reminded people to take out the trash. He made me feel beautiful and sexy and interesting. But the second it was over, reality came crashing back. I was lying there next to this stranger, still breathing hard. And suddenly, I could see my whole life spread out in front of me. Julian at home with our kids, probably asleep on the couch, waiting for me to get back. My wedding ring sitting on Ronan's nightstand where I'd put it before we started. The lie I was going to have to tell about where I'd been and what I'd done. I got dressed as fast as I could and called a taxi, barely saying goodbye to Ronan, who seemed confused about why I was rushing out so suddenly. The whole ride home, I kept thinking about what I was going to say, how I was going to act normal, how I was going to pretend nothing had happened. But when I walked in and saw Julian sleeping on the couch with the TV still on, something in me just broke. Maybe it was the guilt, or maybe it was the alcohol still in my system. But I woke him up and told him everything. Just blurted it all out. Where I'd been, what I'd done, how sorry I was. I was crying and shaking and probably not making much sense. But I told him the truth. Julian just sat there listening, not saying anything, not even looking angry. Just this blank expression that was somehow worse than if he'd started screaming at me. When I finished talking, he was quiet for what felt like forever. Then he said very calmly that he wanted a divorce. I begged him not to leave. I promised it would never happen again, that it was a mistake, that I loved him and our family, and I would do anything to fix it. I cried and pleaded and probably looked completely pathetic. But I didn't care. I couldn't lose him. Couldn't lose everything we'd built together over one stupid night. Eventually, he agreed to try counseling, which I thought meant there was hope. I found a therapist and made appointments, and showed up every week ready to do the work, ready to save our marriage. But Julian clearly didn't want to be there. He'd sit in the corner scrolling through his phone, giving one-word answers when the therapist asked him questions, making it obvious he thought the whole thing was pointless. When the therapist would ask what he could do to help repair the relationship, he'd say things like, "I don't know, maybe we should just get divorced," or make comments about how he couldn't trust me anymore. He never engaged, never seemed interested in actually working through anything. It was like he was just going through the motions to say he tried. Meanwhile, I was doing everything I could think of to show him how sorry I was, how committed I was to making things right. I took over all the household chores, cooked his favorite meals, agreed to things in bed that I'd never been comfortable with before. Anything he wanted, I said yes to. I thought if I could just prove how much I loved him, how much our marriage meant to me, he'd be able to forgive me. But instead of getting better, things got worse. Julian started having these outbursts, where he'd call me horrible names, sometimes loud enough that the kids could hear from their bedrooms. He'd walk through the house ignoring me completely, like I didn't exist. Other times, he'd threaten to divorce me if I didn't do exactly what he wanted when he wanted it. And I found out he was talking to other women online. When I confronted him about messages I saw on his phone, he threw my affair back in my face and said I had no right to question anything he did. He literally grabbed me and dragged me to the front door. Told me if I didn't like it, I could leave right now. Couldn't lose everything we'd built together over one stupid night. Eventually, he agreed to try counseling, which I thought meant there was hope. I found a therapist and made appointments, and showed up every week ready to do the work, ready to save our marriage. But Julian clearly didn't want to be there. He'd sit in the corner scrolling through his phone, giving one-word answers when the therapist asked him questions, making it obvious he thought the whole thing was pointless. That he didn't give a F what I thought or felt. The whole thing was insane. I made one mistake one night in over 7 years together, and he was acting like I was some kind of serial cheater. Meanwhile, he was chatting with random women and treating me like garbage. But somehow that was justified because of what I did. The double standard was unbelievable. I kept thinking he just needed time, that eventually he'd remember how good we were together and we could get past this. It was like he was punishing me and enjoying it, like he got off on making me jump through hoops just to get basic human decency from him. Finally, a few weeks ago, I realized I couldn't keep living like this. Not because I stopped loving him or stopped wanting our marriage to work, but because it was obvious he didn't want it to work. He wanted to make me suffer, and no amount of groveling was ever going to be enough. So, I decided to have one last conversation with him. I went to him and said I understood that he was in pain, that he didn't want to work on our marriage anymore, and that if he truly wanted to move on, I would let him. I told him I loved him and always would, but I couldn't keep trying to save something he didn't want to save. That's when he finally broke down. He hugged me for the first time in months and started crying, telling me he still loved me, but couldn't get the images of what I'd done out of his head. He said he'd had opportunities to cheat over the years, but never did because he loved me and the kids too much. And he couldn't understand how I could throw that away for a few hours of pleasure with some random guy. He admitted he'd been talking to other women, but said he never actually met any of them because it didn't feel right. He said something was broken inside him that couldn't be fixed, that he needed time apart to figure out who he was now. He wanted to be single for a while. Maybe we'd find our way back to each other eventually, but for now, he needed space. I told him I'd sign whatever papers he wanted, that I wouldn't ask for anything in the divorce, that I didn't even want child support because I didn't want to take money from him that should go to the kids. He cried when I said that and told me he hoped someday he could forgive me. But right now, he just needed to work on himself away from me. So, that's where we are now. He's getting a lawyer. We're getting divorced. And I'm supposed to just accept that one mistake destroyed 7 years and 2 children and a whole life we built together? Everyone keeps telling me it's for the best, that we both need to move on, that maybe this is what was meant to happen, but I don't want to move on. I don't want to date other people or start over or build a new life. I want my husband back. I want my family back. I want to undo that one stupid night that ruined everything. I know I F Ed up. I know I hurt him, but the punishment doesn't fit the crime. People cheat and work through it all the time. People make mistakes and find ways to forgive each other. Instead, I'm going to be a divorced single mother because I got drunk one night and made a bad decision. My kids are going to grow up in a broken home because their mother couldn't keep her legs closed for one evening. And Julian gets to be the victim, the good guy who tried so hard to make it work with his cheating wife, but just couldn't get past the betrayal. Maybe he's right that something is broken that can't be fixed. Maybe some mistakes really are too big to come back from. But it still feels unfair that 7 years of love and commitment, and building a life together, can be destroyed by a few hours of stupidity. It feels unfair that I have to lose everything while he gets to start over with a clean slate. I'm not going to date anyone else. I'm not going to move on or find someone new or any of that S. People keep suggesting. I'm going to focus on my kids and hope that someday Julian realizes what he threw away. Hope that someday he decides our history together is worth more than his hurt feelings about one night. People keep saying I should be grateful he's being civil about the divorce, that he's not trying to take the kids away or destroy me financially. Like, I should be thankful he's not making this even worse than it already is. But I don't feel grateful. I feel angry and hurt and like I'm being punished way beyond what I deserve. I cheated one time, in 7 years. And it's cost me everything. My marriage, my family, my whole future. Meanwhile, Julian gets to play the martyr and start fresh with someone who will probably worship the ground he walks on because she'll never know how quickly he can turn cold and cruel when you disappoint him. Maybe that makes me a terrible person, being bitter about the consequences of my own actions. Maybe I should be more remorseful, more accepting of whatever punishment I get. But I can't help feeling like the punishment doesn't fit the crime. Like I'm losing way more than I deserve to lose over one night of bad judgment. And the worst part is I can't even say it wasn't worth it. Because for those few hours with Ronan, I felt more alive and desired and interesting than I had in years. For those few hours, I remembered who I used to be before I became someone's wife, and someone's mother, and someone's disappointment. Maybe that makes me selfish and horrible, but it's the truth. So now I get to figure out how to rebuild my entire life from scratch, while Julian gets to move on like our 7 years together never happened. I get to explain to our kids why mommy and daddy aren't living together anymore, why our family isn't a family anymore. I get to be the cautionary tale people tell about what happens when you cheat on a good man. But I'm not going to pretend I'm grateful for this lesson or that I've learned and grown from this experience. I'm pissed off and heartbroken. And I think Julian is throwing away something good because his ego can't handle the fact that his wife isn't perfect. I think he's being stubborn and unforgiving, and he's going to regret this decision someday. Maybe that makes me delusional. Maybe I'm the only one who can't see how terrible I am, how much I deserve everything that's happening to me. But I can't help feeling like we could have worked through this if he'd actually wanted to. If he'd been willing to fight for our marriage instead of just punishing me for destroying his fantasy of who I was. Instead, I'm about to be divorced and starting over at 30 with 2 kids and a broken heart. All because I wanted to feel alive for one night. All because I made one selfish decision that I can't take back, no matter how much I want to. And Julian gets to be the good guy in this story. The devoted husband who tried so hard to forgive his cheating wife, but just couldn't get past the betrayal. He gets sympathy and support and a fresh start. I get judgment and lectures about the consequences of my actions and a lifetime of wondering what if. Maybe that's justice. Maybe that's what I deserve. But it sure as hell doesn't feel like it.